This episode of the Citadel Cafe is brought to you by listeners like you. Visit patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe to find out how you can become a patron and help make this show possible. This is the Citadel Cafe, episode number 330 for Thursday, August 27th, 2019. My name is Joel Duggan, and the Citadel Cafe is where my friends and I hang out to talk about the geeky stuff that we are into. Recording a day late this week, but thankfully I have convinced, roped, suckered my friend Alastair McFly to come and join me on the podcast. You can find him at ohmyzod.com. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you for having me back. It doesn't take much to rope me back onto the show, Joel. It really doesn't.
I think that between you and Megan, you are both my most talkative friends. So me, also a talker, when we all get into the same room, or either just the two of us get into the same room, like it's just nonstop. So it's very easy to create a podcast with thoughtful, talkative, knowledgeable friends, of which I have many. So it's good. But yeah, it's been a while, and not as long as last time. You were actually on, I'm sure, within the last year. I meant to look this up before the show. But yeah, it's the running joke that people that are not on very often, we always like to take a gamble and a bet as to how long it has been. Sometimes it's crazy where, like, Ryan Murphy will be on the show and like his kids are like a year older. It's like, no, it hasn't been a year. And sure enough, we'll check it. It's been like, like 11 months or something bananas. It's like, oh my God, dude. It's too funny. But yeah, it's been a relatively, we'll say, interesting news week on the entertainment front. I guess we can
interesting
say.
Is right.
Yeah. There's been a lot going on. I wanted to kick things off with something a little bit more, we'll say, positive, as opposed to the other stuff we got to talk about. I was surprised that this didn't come to me via CBC. Normally this kind of thing would be first and forefront on the CBC front on my newsletters, but this is actually from the Star. And in Northwest Territories, which is a province within Canada, for those that don't know, the Northwest Territories has joined with First Nations and Parks Canada to create a new protected area, so a new natural nature reserve in the north, and it is massive. I'm probably going to butcher the name. It's called Théden Nene, I think, which means
I am definitely the wrong person to be asking.
Yeah,
this.
I mean it's hard because like it's got native First Nation stuff involved, and then also Canada also has a lot of French influence, so like I'm not sure which is winning out there, but it means land of the ancestors, and will cover more than, get this, 26,300 square kilometers of boreal forest, tundra, and fresh water, placing it among the largest protected areas in Canada. And
wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. And in the news where lots of stuff is on fire, I just wanted to grab something that was positive. I like it when, I love it when the country that I live in and the promises that were made are being kept. Saying we are going to protect more land, and then a couple years later, we are protecting more land. It was signed yesterday. Like the deal is done.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things that really makes you smile.
Especially as, and I don't really want to get too much into it because, but when you look at what's happening in the US, they're doing the complete opposite at the moment. Yes. And so it's nice that at least Canada is just kind of going, America's, doing stuff that's going to ruin endangered species protections and things like that. And so it's kind of nice that we've got something like this happening in Canada that's the complete opposite.
I don't remember whether I was recording it when I talked to Lou last week. Lou and I always have a little catch up when we're talking, and I know that we talked about it, but there was a Canadian naturalist that was interviewed, and forgive me, I don't remember the source. It might have been CBC. And they were talking about how big of a blow the U.S. chopping funding for Endangered Species Acts was for Canada, because of course the animals don't worry about the border, right? They just kind of go back and forth. So Canada will more than likely see the lowering, and the what's the word I'm looking for? The decline of endangered species, um, because of something that the U.S. has done, and it's just like it sucks. Like it's one of those things. Like, and as a Canadian, you can do nothing. Like outside of hoping that the government that you want to vote for has a strong enough influence on the U.S. that they can try and steer it back. But it's such a crapshoot. Like you as a Canadian just have to go like, oh, good. So all the animals that we're so fighting so hard to protect, as soon as they cross the border, it's just like, wow, whatever,
And you can't stop them from migrating, because then that's just going to end up probably killing them anyway. There's a
well, no,
reason
exactly. They need to. Yeah. I mean, like we'll take a look at the Canada goose. I mean, like they don't stay in Canada. Like they migrate to the south every year, and it's part of their patterns. It's part of their survival. Same. I don't know about caribou. I don't think caribou go far. I don't think they cross the border, but deer certainly would. Like bears. Bears do. Bears have huge territories. So stuff like that is important. And it's in the light of stuff like that, having a story about the Northwest Territories protecting a huge amount of area is really, really cool. And there's another part to this that I don't want to glaze over. And that is that the Lustel Caden, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, the First Nations will share responsibility for managing the area with Parks Canada and the government of the Northwest Territories. So Indigenous rights in terms of fishing, hunting, land rights, all that kind of stuff are being maintained. And it's not a fix, but it's a step in the right direction to repairing relationships with First Nation communities across the country. And I think a really good example, I hope that a lot of provinces that are struggling in relations with First Nations peoples, of which I know very little, can look at this as an example of like, here's a thing done right. It reminds me of the David Attenborough special, I believe it was called Our Planet, and they're talking about overfishing in the Philippines, and the Philippines and some conservationists convinced the fisheries to stay away from this island and this island chain and let the sharks come back. Like just stop shark fishing, stop fishing in this area, just fish around it, don't fish in it. And what happened was the reef and the area became much more healthy in the course of 5 to 10 years. And then the fishermen that were staying outside of it couldn't keep up with all the fish. So by leaving an area protected, that's not like bound by any kind of like wall, it's just an area that you can't fish. Ultimately, it overpopulates and the fish just spill out into the fishing areas and you just catch them. And it's this constantly rejuvenating source of food and work and well-being for that area. And I'm really hoping that the example being set in the Northwest Territories is something that catches on. And I love seeing positive stories like this because so much of it is doom and gloom right now. I thought it was worth sharing. So we'll have a link to that in the show notes. People can read the whole thing in its entirety, and I would highly encourage you to do that. Also, there's some beautiful pictures. Really, really pretty spot. So, yeah. And then you and I were actually talking, was it just yesterday or today, about the development of the Spider-Man movie franchise and where that is going.
Yeah.
So spoiler warning for people. We won't talk about any kind of like, we'll say endings or future movies because I haven't seen Far From Home. So I didn't read this whole article. I linked to it and we'll have it in the show notes, but I didn't read the whole thing because they started talking about certain parts of Far From Home and what that means for the future of Spider-Man, and I tuned out. I skipped out. I just read the part about like the relationship with Sony falling away. So when did you first hear about this?
I heard about this a few days ago when the story first broke out on Deadline. And because I'm pretty sure that they were the one who got the scoop first, and they haven't cited a source, but there's a lot of talk that it was probably Sony who leaked it, which is a pretty interesting thing because the entire deal at the moment is that Feige's been there as producer, working with Sony on the Spider-Man films, and they would, I think it was something like, Disney would fund it, and they would get 5% of the opening box office returns, but they also have the merchandising rights. So all the merchandise, all the toys, that's
Mm.
all Disney that get that. So it worked out really well for Sony because they didn't have to put that much into it, but they got the bulk of the profits, but they do lose out on merchandise. But, that kind of balanced out. So Disney came to them with a new deal, which was we go 50-50 on the production costs and also on the returns. So we're doing a split share, but they also wanted to keep the merchandising rights. So whilst I can see it kind of being like, well, it's going to make it a little bit cheaper for the production side of things. Obviously, getting a lot of return, but it does sound like Disney would end up coming out a lot better for Sony's own movie. And I I'm torn. I'm torn because I do prefer Marvel and Disney's way of doing these films.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Sony haven't had the best track record with Spider-Man, and that's because they weren't involved that much with the first two Spider-Man movies made by Sam Raimi. They left him in control. They started interfering in Spider-Man 3 and were the ones who were pushing him for changes. And since then, and the Amazing Spider-Man films, that's where Sony have been more hands-on.
Right.
And so seeing them kind of going, oh, we're going to take over and we're not going to agree to this kind of deal. And I say this, but we don't really know which side was the one to really kind of go nope to it. I think it's Sony saying no to Disney, but then the talk is also that Disney, were refusing to help or budge on it. So I think it's kind of a bit, double sided that they just couldn't make this agreement. And then Sony seemed to be spinning it as well as Feige is just too busy with all of the new characters that they're bringing into the Marvel universe, and that sounds like it's spin. And I think that it was probably leaked to Deadline as a way to try and force Disney's hand. I would
Mm.
think that they probably knew that if the news broke and they were the ones to break it and could curate that, then the internet will go up in arms about
Mm-hmm.
it. And
Yeah,
that
and they're up in arms, but no one is blaming Disney, right?
no.
Like, and it's sound like in that breakdown, it does sound like yeah, Disney, who has a huge part of the pile, is wanting more of the pile. And
Mm,
granted, they have the success of the entire MCU to say like, look, we know what we're doing, so your 50% investment, which we want you to increase, um, is in good hands. Like we're not going to make crap movies because we want to continue this. And it sounds like Disney wanted more control because they
mm,
probably had bigger plans for Spider-Man and the Spider-Man universe and how that kind of folds into because it's in the trailer. They talk about the multiverse, so like that's not a
yeah.
spoiler. So
And
so
and
that kind of
we know
thing.
as
Like,
well.
sorry, go ahead.
All I was gonna say was that we also know that ultimately Marvel wants Spidey back. They've
Mm-hmm.
been trying to get all of their properties back since they started selling off the rights back in the 90s. And I think Sony are worried that, Marvel are coming after them. And this is just like phase one of them trying to get full control of Spidey.
Well, here's the thing. Sony on its own with the Spider-Man properties does not make good movies. They can't make money. They must cost an absolute fortune to make. So unless they're making it all back and then some, um, I feel like they're making Spider-Man movies just to hold on to the license. Like I don't feel
Mm.
like
Well,
they.
that's what they had to do.
Yes, no, exactly.
They had to. Yeah.
I mean, put if you're worried about this kind of thing and it's at a point where you're going to take your ball and go home, which is what it looks like. Because despite the fact that we can sort of still see Disney as the bully here, it
Mm.
still sort of feels like Sony going and then just leaving, right? And you're like, but who suffers is us, the fans that want good Spider-Man movies. And to me, it's just like instead of saying we're taking our ball and going home, Sony should just come at Disney with just like, all right, you want Spider-Man? It's going to cost you this. And just like lay it down. Ask for as much as you want. Because I'm pretty sure that you will think they're never going to pay this. And then Disney will just pay it. Because Disney knows that if they had control of Spider-Man with the movies, potential Disney Plus television spin-offs, toys, licensing, video games, like they could make all that back in the first 3 years. Like it's just, especially with Feige, like, oh man, I think the problem where everybody is up in arms about it is that if Sony made good movies, it would be a much harder thing to talk about, right?
Yeah,
if they were, but they're not. That's the thing. So it's like, so Sony, you suck at this, and yet you still have control over this property that we love, and you won't let people that are really good at this handle it. It's just, it's selfish and petty from that standpoint. It's not selfish and petty when you look at the greed from Disney, right?
That's it. I mean, a lot of people I think are probably looking at it and just kind of going, okay, like one of you is probably wrong. You may both be in the wrong. We don't care. Just kiss, make up, do whatever it takes. Just make a good movie and give us the Spider-Man that we want, and don't let it all crumble and fall apart just because of some bureaucratic politics between the two companies.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, at the same time, I do follow a lot of this stuff and get concerned with the size of some of these companies. Like it really becomes like, oh my God, like, do we really want all of this under one roof? Because at some point it starts to get, there is that threat where if things start to go sideways, then it's really only under control of one company. And without any competition, it becomes like, does the superhero burnout hit? And at that point, are the movies still good despite the fact that most of them are controlled by Disney? I mean, everybody's waiting with bated breath to find out what Disney's going to do with the X-Men now that, Fox, the Fox movie franchises and stuff like that have been folded in. So we shall see. Speaking of Disney, and because I mentioned Disney Plus, I did notice this earlier. I don't have any links. It's just a teaser. But this Friday, so I guess tomorrow, the Mandalorian trailer for the show on Disney Plus is supposed to drop.
Oh, I did not know this.
So I'm hoping to post the show tonight, Thursday. So if you're listening to this, then keep your eyes peeled for that, and I'm sure it'll be in our Discord as well. Anything else flying across your screen this week?
So I did notice some interesting news about the Orville, which it's one of those things where I have watched all of the Orville so far. They've done 2 seasons. I'm not that much of a fan. And it's odd because a lot of people who are huge Star Trek Next Generation fans are very much into the Orville. For me, it feels like fan service and isn't quite to the level that that I would want from that. But that aside, they have announced a 3rd season, and it's been ages since they it's been a long time coming. Basically, that people have been waiting for a long time. And the announcement came, but there was also an announcement that it will be moving from Fox to Hulu. So it will be moving from network television to a streaming service, putting it behind a paywall, which has had a lot of kind of sort of feedback, criticisms, concerns, and for some people, excitement as well. Because it really kind of shows where things are going and the fact that network television is kind of dying in the US now.
Yeah. You want to know who owns Hulu?
Who? It's Disney, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because they have it all packaged in amongst their Disney Plus package, so you can get that and ESPN and stuff. And
Hulu is owned by Hulu LLC, a joint venture between Disney and Comcast. I would imagine Disney probably owns the lion's share of that.
But my understanding for it is that the 2nd season, Fox had started to realize that advertising was killing their audience. They were finding that I think the age demographic was something like 18 to 35, when people were seeing ads, like they were just moving away from network television, and it was just how many commercials they had to sit through and how long they went on for.
Mm.
And we've always been used to that, you know, TV shows would be broken up. You'd have a segment of ads, and the episodes had to be relegated to like 43 to 45 minutes in order to be able to fit in additional ads to bring it up to an hour. But season two, they changed the way that they did ads. And when I say they, I mean Fox specifically. They would do something else. I've forgotten what they called it. But it allowed for the episodes to actually be longer, and it gave the episodes something like an extra 5 minutes. But it was a whole 5 minutes that they could add more scenes and more effects and wrap up stories and put in a little bit more to them than they would otherwise have the time to do. So when they've moved to Hulu, they've been given the promise that they can have the same amount of creative control there, because the Hulu has an ad-supported version, and then you pay extra if you don't want ads.
I was going to
So they
ask,
still
yeah.
have like, yeah, so they still have like a limit, and there's still going to be ads in there.
Are they
But
pre-roll ads or are they mid-show ads?
that I don't know. I would assume that they're possibly mid-show,
So I'm because I've got Prime
but
right
I don't
now,
know.
and we'll get into that later. But I've got Prime, and before the show, I get a pre-roll for a Prime, like it's an advertisement for another Prime show that I'm probably interested in the first place. But it's
Mm.
one trailer ad, and then the show starts, and then there's nothing else. Now I'm on a free trial. I don't know what changes if I was actually paying, whether or not. I imagine I probably still see the Prime trailer, but I'm not seeing ads for anything else. But if it's Hulu, if Hulu's got just a pre-roll ad, that's not the end of the world. The stuff that
No,
drives me nuts is
no.
when there's mid-roll ads and they're the same ad. Like if you're going to give me
Yeah.
4 ads in the course of a show, they're probably, I mean, you know enough about me from my watch profiles and from my online stuff, you know, dear services, that you can at least make the ads relevant, but make them different. Don't show me the same ad 4 times like that. That's when I start to get annoyed with you, and I'm less likely to even to ever do anything about, you know, the product and or the show in that ad, because if it starts to annoy me, I'm just going to tune it out. Like I'm just like, nope, zero interest in that thing, despite the fact that the first time I saw the trailer, I probably was like, oh, that looks cool.
I've got a feeling as well that Fox probably just don't want to fund it anymore. And that not being that they wouldn't have done a season three. I do believe that they would have done a season three, but sci-fi is expensive. Sci-fi
Yes.
shows are really, really expensive to make versus just doing a regular drama or
Hmm.
live sports and all that kind of thing. And since the Disney purchase of Fox, I believe that that's what Fox are focusing on more now and doing less of those. And Hulu, if I remember correctly, in the US is the home of a lot of sci-fi shows that, you know, have been on for years and have either finished their run, like Stargate and Star Trek, or you know, shows that got cancelled, like Firefly. That's where kind of all that is. So it's more kind of at home on Hulu, and because of the way that their financing model works, they're probably more likely in a place to be able to pay to keep the show going.
Mm.
And I'm wholly thinking that this is one of the reasons why Netflix keeps canceling their shows, is because a lot of the sci-fi stuff that they make there just gets far too expensive for them to continue, for the production sets and effects and cast salaries.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the thing there. But it's just really significant that from the conversation that Seth MacFarlane's been giving about this, because I think that we're finally at that tipping point where network television is really on the way out. Certainly the way that we know of it. And you know, cord cutting and going to online streaming services, whilst yes, it's becoming a little bit more expensive with all of the different services we're getting. Um,
It's not though. That's the thing.
it's compared to what network television costs are like. No, absolutely, you're still saving money.
Oh, you're still saving money. And something that gets brought up on the Daily Tech News Show, which I know I mention a lot, but it's my favorite podcast, um, is that though the hosts there are always quick to remind everybody, try canceling your cable bill and then try to
Mm.
cancel Netflix. It takes 3 clicks to cancel Netflix. No questions asked. You're not charged. You can come back at any time. I did it with Crave this year, another service that I was anticipating being a little bit like I've never used it before, but it was like, it was easy. I signed up. I watched Game of Thrones. I had an extra 2 weeks. I watched Ballers, and then when my calendar said, "Oh, by the way, you should cancel your Crave so you don't get charged tomorrow," I canceled it. Nothing. I haven't. They didn't know. They didn't get me. Like I did. I wasn't stuck for another month. Like I watched it for 2 months and I bailed, and it cost me I think it was $20 a month because I had the HBO thing. But it was worth it because I covered Game of Thrones on this show. I really enjoyed Ballers, and I was some other show. I can't remember what it was. Some other HBO thing that I watched. But yeah, like I had access to a bunch of stuff, and it wasn't worth $20 a month for me to keep going because they didn't quite have the content that I wanted. But it's something that I keep my login and I keep everything handy because Ballers right now is in a new season, and there was something else on HBO. What's on? Oh, Crave. No, sorry, not HBO. It's Crave in Canada. It's Picard. So when Picard comes out, I'll be back on to Crave to watch it, and so I keep that login handy because it's awesome like that. You can spend, okay, for these 2 months, there's a lot of TV going on, probably the wintertime in Canada. There's not a lot of outdoors activities. I'm going to up my streaming budget to like $40 or $50 a month. Right now, it's just Netflix, which is 14. Like, that is dirt cheap. I'm probably going to include Prime in the coming months because for those people that don't know, you can use Prime on Twitch to support a Twitch streamer and get Prime, which is free shipping, and the Prime Video all in one, like $4.99 US. So that's a no-brainer. Like, that to me is just like, if it's cheaper than $10, I get to support somebody else that I know that's an individual, like an underdog, and I get the video from Amazon Prime. Right now in all the streaming services, aside from some little diamonds in the rough like Discovery and Picard and stuff like that, Prime seems to have the stuff that I am the most interested in. And so that's where I'm leaning. But I'm also happy that it's also one of the cheapest. Now, ask me again come Christmas time when Disney Plus is out, and I'm probably going to be forking over, but that's only like $8.99 Canadian. Like, that's not terrible.
That's it.
Sub $10. I mean, like, you can't eat. Well, I shouldn't say you can't eat at McDonald's. You probably can. You can't eat at a pub for $8. Like, burgers are $10, $12, $14 around here for a good burger at a nice pub. So like, for the fact that you can watch all of that Disney content, like that Marvel, Star Wars, all the cartoons and stuff. Like, I mean, there's going to be a lot of content there. Plus the new stuff that they're doing. It's going to be really, really cool.
I think a lot of the challenges that Netflix are going to face, though, is the fact that they keep driving up their costs. And they say it's all to be able to make new content, which they'll inevitably cancel at some point down the line.
I feel...
But the other thing is, it's what was I going to say? They keep bumping up the cost, but the thing is that that price of entry is getting so much higher than all the competition, and all the competition are coming in a lot lower. And with all of the shows being pulled, like Disney pulling a lot of shows from Netflix as well, it's going to leave Netflix's library looking a little bit more bare at a higher price point. So I think if Netflix aren't scared yet, they should be.
I think Netflix needs to double down on quality as opposed to quantity.
100%.
I spend far too much time. Yeah, I spend far too much time looking through Netflix than I do actually watching it. Something that I found refreshing about my first cruise through Prime was just like, and here's the shows you want to watch. Like, do I care about movies? Nope. I want series. I want to select something that I can just watch and then not have to worry about selecting what's next. I just had to hit the next episode and just continue watching it. And so yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how it all shakes out. Again, more people in this space, eventually the consumers are going to win, right? Because Netflix is either going to have to, well, they won't drop the prices, or if they do, it'll be very well received, right? Like if Netflix says, hey, we know that we upped it, 2 years ago, in 2018 or 19 to like $14, but hey, we're dropping it down to 12 just because we feel like we want, to reward those people or whatever, or we're just because we feel like it's the right thing to do to compete with all these other services. No one's going to complain.
Would they do an ad-supported model?
Maybe. I hope they don't.
They could even do that.
Yeah, I hope they don't. It's one thing I am very spoiled about being a cord cutter. I get so agitated when I'm over at people's houses and they have the television on and ads play. Like it drives me crazy. Drives me crazy. I hate them.
Yeah, that was always the same for me going to a friend's house when I was a kid and watching Star Trek on Sky, which was the satellite TV service,
Mm,
because it would just be constantly interrupted by commercials, and it's like it's not like this on the BBC because
yeah,
BBC don't have commercials in the middle of episodes, and so just getting commercials in the middle of Star Trek was always so alien to me.
yeah.
No pun intended.
I saw what you did there. Well, speaking of space and aliens, that's actually what I'm watching on Prime is The Expanse. It has moved from Sci-Fi this year to Prime, where it's going to continue. Season 4 is going to be on Prime. Seasons 1 through 3 were on Sci-Fi, and I started watching this when it first came out, and I know that I've talked about it on the show before. I couldn't have talked about it very long because I did not finish season 1. I know I had seen a few episodes and they either grabbed me or didn't grab me enough. I couldn't quite remember. So I started reading through some of the summaries of different episodes to just try and kind of gauge myself, like where I was, and also kind of refamiliarize myself with the politics and the drama that was going on in the show. For those of you that are not aware, it's a sci-fi television series developed by Mark Fergus and Hawk Otsby, based on the Expanse novels by James S.A. Corey. Those come highly recommended from some people that I trust in podcasting. They really like the Expanse novels and feel that the show does a very good job of interpreting those. Um, it's set in a future where humanity has colonized the solar system and then follows different factions. So you've got Earthers, you've got Mars and Martians, and then you've got Belters, which are people that mine in asteroid belts in the solar system. And it's been long enough that these three settlements of humans have very different cultures, different governments, and so Earth is all one Earth, yay, but doesn't get along with Mars and Belters. So it becomes this like status war. Belters being the poor miners. I think Mars is mostly war and military stuff, and then Earth is regarded greatly as like selfish, but doesn't look at themselves that way.
And my understanding is it's overpopulated as well.
Yeah, so trying to expand, but they can't. They're getting nowhere to go, and so people are trying to get like off world to find work. But when they find work in the belt, it's also really terrible living conditions. Kids growing up in 0G have a lot of health issues. Like there's all this kind of stuff that they bring into it, and it's a very well thought out, well built kind of universe in terms of the backgrounds and the depth of it all, and I really enjoyed that. But I really was surprised that I had only watched the first like 3 or 4 episodes. When I went to go read through these synopses, I was like, all right, well, I'm not starting at the beginning just because I didn't feel like rewatching stuff, especially if I remembered liking it but not remember being blown away by it. And I get the impression now, having jogged my memory, this is one of those shows that you have to give it like 4 to 5 episodes.
Yeah, and that's where I struggle because I really want to see the show.
Yeah.
It's straight up. This is something that I really do want to see. But I think it was around the time that Game of Thrones was on, and I was busy. I just didn't have the time. I saw the first episode, and I got that feeling like it's one of those ones you need to sit with it, and it's going to take time because it's going to be in depth. And I just didn't have the time to, and so I kind of dropped off. But I have seen a a video I caught on YouTube, which was about all the planets and all the you know you've got people living on various moons around Saturn and things like that as well. And they kind of went into a lot of those factions, but was spoiler free, which I absolutely loved.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So I've got some idea as to the kind of setting and and that's really cool. And I also watch a great YouTube series with a guy called Kyle Hill, who does a lot of sort of science education on a show called Because Science. Really worth checking out for anybody listening who's not seen it. He basically takes a lot of pop culture, superheroes, sci-fi, and stuff, and goes through the real science behind them in a really entertaining style. Um, but he is a huge, huge fan of The Expanse because of how scientifically accurate it is. He can't praise it enough. And he even hosted one of the panels at Comic Con for them. just partly because of how big he's been on it, and it's great. And so just hearing some of the stuff that he's done in his own videos about the way that ship propulsion works in it, like every time he talks about just the way that ships move or that gravity works, he just beams with excitement.
Yeah.
Absolutely beams about it, and it just makes me want to watch it even more.
Yeah, I don't know how the science holds up after watching 4 or 5 episodes, because there's a couple times where it's like, the spaceships, absolutely. The space suits, some of the stuff that happens with characters, I'm just like, I don't know, but I could be wrong. I'm not well versed in that kind of stuff, but it's
Yeah,
one of those shows that you do have to give 4 to 5 episodes, because the fourth one, which is where I started on my rewatch, I realized after a few minutes into it that I had actually seen it before, but I had forgotten it. And it turns out that was a good thing, because it was a really exciting episode. It was an excellent episode to get back into. So if you're struggling through episodes 1 and 2, just hold on for 4, because 4 is when things really start to unfold and you get to know all the factions. Like, I feel like the first 3 episodes, Mars is talked about like in the shadows, like that you don't see people from Mars. You just they're perceived to you as a military threat, much like the Empire is in Star Wars. Like, that's kind of how the Expanse early on comes out. But as things develop, you get to actually see characters interact with people from Mars and realize that, oh, wait a minute, this is a lot more gray than I thought. Something that we talk about in Game of Thrones quite a bit, and how gray that is. Like, there's no real good guy. Like, there's a lot of gray that happens in that show. Something that's really complicated about The Expanse is the world building, and the names and cultures and locations and all this kind of stuff are all, of course, made up in terms of like the factions and the culture. So it's not like saying a television show that has multiple cultures, but like France and Germany and, the US and Canada, like people that are familiar with that kind of stuff, everything is new. So like Belters have a different accent, and it sounds kind of like a mishmash between Chinese and South African. Like, they speak English, but it has this weird kind of broken way of being delivered. And it's cool, but it takes you a minute to realize that everybody talks kind of funny. And then there's also other like sub languages, like slang, that's almost like it's indiscernible, but the people that speak it know what they're saying. Like, it's very unique, and I would imagine a lot of work went into the novels in developing these languages, and they do a pretty good job of making it something that you don't struggle to understand. But after a while, you start to recognize, oh, they're a Belter because they're talking like this, without them having to flash up on screen, in the belt, or location, whatever. Like, if you see a bunch of people at a space station at a bar and they're all in mixed company, you can start to sort of realize who's who based on how they're acting. And people from Earthers, they just kind of talk like you and I do now. Mars, same thing, but they are much stiffer. Like, you can tell that they're very military and very, what's the word I'm looking for? Just unapproachable. They're not warm. They're not friendly. Even if they're being nice to you, it's still very stiff. And so you get to kind of know these things over the course of time. But the thing that was sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I'll ask it. So it's basically a little bit kind of like when just present day, you see somebody who's French with a French accent, they're from France. You
Yes.
hear
Yeah.
somebody with a German accent, it's like they're from Germany. And so they've made it so it's very easy to tell the region that they're from, which must be very difficult to pull off.
Yeah.
To something the way it's that noticeable.
Yeah, and
From
it's
something
not
that
something
doesn't
that you
really
can.
exist.
Yeah, and it's not something that you can do. You can't watch it and be on your phone. Like, you really have to pay
Mm.
attention, because there are certain times where events, timelines, places are important. And so when they have an establishing shot and they go like, Sirius station, you need to know that you're on Sirius station. Yes, you're going to know as soon as people start talking that you're talking, that you're in Belter territory. But Sirius station, or the location, tends to be very important to the plot, because in the first 6 episodes, the plot so far, again, no spoilers, is that there is a disaster in space, and the three different factions are all blaming one another for what happened. And only the crew, the main characters that you're following, know what really happened because they were there. And they're the only people that survived. So that's why they're important. And that's the thing that binds them together. And so as you're following a few of these characters around, including a detective that's trying to sort out things, Joe Miller is the detective, and he's kind of getting the information as you're getting the information. So it's important to kind of pay attention to how he is trying to solve this missing persons case, and then finds himself in the throes of these political, kind of like CIA back dealings and all that kind of stuff. It's not called the CIA, but like that kind of spy and political, twists and turns and stuff. And so you really have to pay attention. What I took away from the fourth episode, which was so exciting, is because it's the first time you see space combat. Not so much space disaster, but space combat. And it reminds me of Battlestar Galactica, where there's no lasers. Like, it's not futuristic sci-fi. It is gritty. Like, when they're repairing stuff, they're usually hoses and nuts and bolts and things. They all use kind of like like a tablet interface, like a touch screen sort of thing to control everything. And there's a lot of voice commands. But when it comes to like ships breaking down and airlocks, that doesn't all feel very distant from where we are now, in terms of like there's a big seal that has to like double door, attach to things, and you have to pressurize both sides. Like, there's no beaming, there's no particle stuff. There's no phasers. Guns have bullets. They look different, but they shoot projectiles. Same with the space weapons, rail guns, mini guns, like they shoot projectiles. And the thing that I think they handle so well to make that action feel perilous is the sound design. So much like the Vipers in Battlestar Galactica, when the guns go off, it's muffled because it's only the air inside that vibrates that can hear it, not because there's no air outside for sound to travel. And it would look and be silly and wouldn't be exciting if you were outside and they fire the gun and no sound happened. So what they do is they give you what the approximation of what the crew would hear inside. And so it just sounds more submarine-like and is constantly reminding you of the threat of outside. Like, really, it's basically like having a dogfight in a balloon, right? One hole, and unless you've got the means to fix it, you're boned. So it becomes very tense. Like, I remember leaning forward watching episode 4 going, okay, I'm invested. Like, I want these dudes and dudettes to succeed in their mission, but holy crap, there's a lot of bullets flying around. Like, there's people here that I don't want to die. And we're not so far into the show that you're not, like, you don't know who's safe, you don't, or who, and I'm not even sure if you ever do know. So I'm on board. I'm happy to have found it again, and happy that I can watch it on a streaming service that allows me to just like click next, play the next episode, not worry about advertisements, watch whenever I want. I'm not waiting week to week, for it to come out. And I enjoy the acting as well. There's a couple things that are kind of run of the mill, like Joe Miller, the cop that I mentioned earlier. All the police officers kind of like surrounding him, they're all kind of like cookie cutter characters. They're not really anything different or futuristic about them. He's different, but all the other officers that he deals with are pretty throwaway. I'm not a big fan of all of the crew members, but I do like Holden and Burton. Who are two of the dudes that are on the not the Canterbury, that's a different ship. What's it called? Starts with an R. Rosalante, I think, is the name of the ship, and it's a stolen ship, so it changes names at some point, and they're really cool. And I also like Kamal, who's the pilot, and they all have these really cool personalities and trust issues. And what they do to build the camaraderie is put them through this disaster, so they survived. So there's the bond that starts there. But then there's this information kind of trickle down and mistrust and not necessarily mistakes, but like, for example, if I was keeping something from you that I should have told you, but it's not
How could
bad
you,
news.
Joel?
Yeah.
How could you?
But it's not bad news. I did the right thing. I just,
Mm.
you just didn't need to know right now. But eventually it comes out and I have to tell you. And yeah, you know what? I could have told you earlier, but it doesn't change the fact that you're not mad about what I did. You're just mad that I didn't tell you sooner. But
Yeah.
everybody in that boat, pardon the pun, is in the same trust issue dance of like, I didn't tell you because I didn't know if I could trust you. I'm telling you now. So the person is mad at first because they weren't told, but then eventually, without them beating you over the head with it, you realize that that person comes back, either shakes hands or does a cheers and has a drink with the person that they're mad at, because they realize that because I'm told now, I'm trusted.
Mm.
And so
I suppose that's a little bit like what we were saying with Battlestar Galactica. From on that series, though, ended up being a little bit mistrust as to who's the Cylon.
Right.
And to have somebody on your side, would be kind of a little bit better in that kind of scenario than everybody just assuming that you were something, untoward.
Yeah, exactly.
Or
So
not trustworthy.
yeah, and I don't want to get into too much because then it starts to get into spoiler territory. But it's cool to be at this kind of like entry level for this series. A lot of my friends and other podcasters that I listen to that like sci-fi really like The Expanse. So it gives me hope that it's going to have that kind of like tight knit crew, favorite characters, some cool camaraderie. But I'm watching it being built, and I haven't seen that in a long time. Like it would be like going back and watching TNG, and watching that crew become closer over time, and the cast as well, I'm assuming. So like for that, it's a cool experience. And I know I'm behind on it, like I'm a couple years behind. I even skipped out on looking too much through the IMDb for the cast because there's one character name that I didn't recognize. I was like, ooh, I'm not sure when they come in, and I don't know if I want to know when and how long they've been on. So I've been trying to. I haven't really looked too much further into it, but
Yeah.
I'm
especially
I'm
if you
liking
start
it.
to see who goes out. It's not always just who comes in; it's who goes out.
That too. So I'm curious to see how it's going to go. But it's high production value, like really high production value. You feel the threat. It does not feel cheap at all. It doesn't feel like it's all on the same set. Like there's definitely a few familiar places. Like there's a bridge of the ship that we've been on a few times now, and that feels comfortable. And there's also the personal quarters for Joe Miller, the cop. You're in there quite a bit, so you kind of feel that comfort. But other than that, it's still a very changing show, so it kind of keeps you on your toes. I highly recommend it, and if people have not taken advantage of their 30-day free trial with Amazon Prime, which is what I'm doing, then I think you should check it out. Or support a Twitch streamer if you know of one that you or maybe your kids follow. That's an excellent way to get Prime and support a couple things in the process. I think it's a really good thing that they're doing over there on Twitch. So check that out.
I just did a very brief skim over the Wikipedia page for it, and it seems that of the 3 seasons, each season gets rated even higher each time, which is very promising.
Yeah, and I would say that
back to.
No, I was just say I from what I recall from other podcasters talking about it, they once they got renewed, then they took a chunk of the books and realized, okay, now that we have the time, this is how we're going to pace this out.
Okay, that's good.
Again, the person that read the books didn't want to spoil anything, so they were vague. But but it's one of those things where it's like, okay, it looks like that. Now once the show got past the first season, they're like, okay, now we can really plan the long game, right?
And you were saying before about just how good the sound was and how immersive that was. And one of the things that came up here was that when it launched in 2016, they actually won an award for best sound editing.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that makes sense.
Series.
Yeah. That makes sense. Has it really been since 2016? Man, that's crazy. It feels like this has been talked about a lot, like maybe because it's just moved recently to
even
Prime.
before then, it was December 14th, 2015
Oh, wow.
And season 1 ended on February 2nd, 2016. So, I'm now looking at these dates and feeling ashamed of myself that I've taken this long to actually get around to it, especially knowing that, it's been so highly rated and stuff.
Well, we have a good
But
problem,
it's just
man.
time.
Yeah, there's a lot now with more and more streaming services. It's less to me about the value. It's more about your time. Like it's not that you can't justify the $14 for Netflix because of the sheer volume of stuff on it. It's more like I don't have the time. Like if I'm not sitting down and watching, at least an hour or two of TV a week, which is not a lot, then I feel like I'm wasting money, right? That balances out. I watch much more in the wintertime than I do in the summertime. So there's that. But it's one of those things where like I do start to feel that it's less about like even if a series or a service only had 2 shows or 3 shows, it's not that it's only 3 shows. It's like, do I have time to even watch 2 of those? Because I might not, right? It all depends.
Yeah, and my worry is always doing what happened with Game of Thrones for me, which was that I watched a couple of episodes and then I was too busy, and then I forgot what happened in them, so I had to go back and rewatch them, and then I got busy again, and I still couldn't remember what happened. So I rewatched like the first half of season 1 like at least 3 times before I was able to get to the very end of the season. And so whenever I see a show, especially one that's been out for a little while, and I know there's a lot of content there, if it's something where you can't be on your phone during it, where you have to be that focused, I always want to make sure I have the time, that I've stopped watching everything else, that all the things that I'm trying to rewatch, like I've been rewatching Next Generation, I've been rewatching all the RoboCop movies recently. I've been on a big kind of thing for that, and I'm just trying to make sure that I don't force myself into watching the Prime Directives TV show because that was terrible.
Don't do that. Watch The
So
Expanse instead.
no, I know, that's it. It's like, I'm just on this RoboCop kick, and it's like I kind of want more RoboCop, but I know that's bad. I shouldn't. I need to watch this instead. So, if anything, this is probably coming at the right time for me to make sure that I bought it on DVD. I bought the entire series on DVD. That was one of the biggest wastes of money I've ever spent on my DVD collection. If you've
Yeah.
ever seen that show, but
Yes, I have.
so bad.
So the thing about the Expanse that I'm enjoying right now is that it's the one show I'm watching. I'm just pressing next, and there's 3 seasons to go. Well, 2.5 seasons ahead of me, plus whatever's happened in the 4th that's not out yet. At least I think it's not out yet. So for me, it's easy, and I'm not focusing on multiple things. Like it's just the one story, the one storyline. So that's what I'm excited about. Well, that brings us into the Internet Minute, which is brought to you by you, dear listener. If you are enjoying the Citadel Cafe, if you get value out of the show, then please consider putting a little value back in. You can become a member at patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe. We are a listener-supported show. Alastair and I have been complaining about ads this whole show. We don't have any on the Citadel Cafe, and that's because of the patrons. You guys keep the lights on. You keep the conversation going in the Discord all week long, and you make us aware of things that we're not made aware of. I believe you and I did a little pre-show chat in our barista cut. My Discord is where I first heard about bees being added to Minecraft. So there's a bunch of different things that happen in the Discord, and that is a patron-only perk. So if you're interested, head over to patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe. We are currently at 19 patrons, which is down 1 from last month. So I like to always add 1, and we're a few days away from the end of August. So if you're on the fence, then for about the price of a fancy cup of coffee every month, you could support the podcast and join in a bunch of really cool conversations throughout the week about nerdy stuff. There's also food channels and Lego to round out all of the dorky interests in the Discord. So hopefully you enjoy it. Check it out, patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe. My pick this week is a news article, and it's about space. We're staying in space.
Space is good. I like
space. This is, as I mentioned before, a CBC article. And the headline is that scientists may have detected a black hole devouring a neutron star. And I was like, that sounds aggressive. I want to know more. And they can't say for sure, as with a lot of these things, but they say that they are 99% sure. For scientists, I'm going to call that a win. And essentially, if I can remember correctly, a neutron star is an extraordinarily dense solar body. Like it is only the size of like a small city, but it's something like a teaspoon of the material would weigh 10 million tons. Like it's really hard to comprehend how dense a neutron star is. And
pretty much anything in space, when it gets to that kind of size and density, it's just numbers almost lose all meaning.
exactly, and it just becomes scary.
Yeah.
and that's what, and this is what happens when you've got the next scary thing in the universe, one of the more well known, a black hole. Everybody knows what those are. They're a gravity suck. They not even light can escape a black hole. And so, true to form, we have nerd fight: black hole versus neutron star. Spoiler: black hole won. So, the scientists in the article go on to say that this was, an extraordinary event, similar to the black hole discoveries. What was it? The color of a black hole, or two black holes devouring one another? I can't remember what it was. A couple months ago, they had that discovery as well. There seems to be a new thing that's happening in outer space, like every other month. There's this new scientists for the first time have seen X. And they go into great detail about it in the article. It's also not like overly techy. They break it down fairly easily. But they're talking about like Einstein's theory of relativity, stuff like how long it took for the star to be destroyed, and the what that tells us about the way that gravity works, and how gravitational waves are generated like by binary neutron stars, and how those waves ripple across the universe, similar to dropping like a stone in a pond. I won't paraphrase any further because I'm probably going to get some stuff wrong, but we'll have the link in the show notes. And it's one of those stories where you just like, there's all of these immediate problems on our planet, and I get that, but there's also this really cool knowledge sponge that is happening right now in astrophysics, and it's just really enlightening to just kind of see how excited these scientists are about this stuff, and that comes through in some of the quotes.
When they got the picture of the black hole, when they were able to get that first picture, and just seeing the video footage of how ecstatic they were, just jumping up and down. That's like it was for me Christmas morning when I was a kid and I had Thunderbird 2 as a toy under the tree. That was just absolutely fantastic. And I'm screaming, just like any kid is excited about stuff. And they're at that level. They're just as excited as any kid on Christmas Day. And rightly so, with all the kind of stuff that they're discovering, even things which are just kind of beyond our understanding, that they're able to piece together is just incredible.
Yeah, I'm looking at the article now. Recent detection of the first gravity waves also represent the first time merging black holes have ever been observed by science. So, picture of a black hole, then they got to see two merging black holes, and now they're seeing a neutron star being devoured by a black hole. It's just like, black holes are busy, man.
They are just very, very hungry.
Yeah, and scary. I think the closest one is something like 26,000, or I think it's 26,000 light years away. I think is the closest black hole.
Yeah, that's the closest supermassive black hole. Yeah, that's the one that's right in the center of our galaxy. There'll probably be a point when we get sucked into that if it keeps growing, but we'll be long since extinct by then anyway.
You and I are not going to have to worry about that.
Yeah, but even as a species, we're probably not going to be around at the time that happens. That's a long way off. So we don't have to be worried about it at this point. Not that far away. But it is kind of scary to think that there's one in the center of our, of our own galaxy, and to imagine being the scientist or amongst those scientists the moment that they discovered that must have been both mind-boggling, exciting, and scary as well. Just to think that one of these deadly things is right in our own galaxy, which, galactically speaking, is on our doorstep. There's also like I saw an article on Vice on their motherboard page with a really interesting headline as well, saying our galaxy's black hole suddenly lit up and nobody knows why. Especially like the first time I saw that, it's like, okay, well, that's obviously something around it. But the concept of a black hole lighting up is such an oxymoron.
Yeah, because they suck in light. Like that's
yeah.
in
So
their
for it to be
nature.
kind of it lit up and nobody knows why, it just seems like, okay, what the hell has gone wrong with this black hole? And should we be concerned? Should we be worried about it? But it's there was a couple of objects that went by. I believe that there was a gas cloud that was nearby, and there was also a star that made a pass nearby as well. And so they think it's one of those. And the star that went by was, was way larger than our own sun as well. And I think it was basically that getting eaten up that just ended up making it pulsate. I think it was something like 17 times brighter than anything else that they've seen.
Wow.
I'm trying to find the bit in the article where it mentions it. But it's like, since they've been observing this black hole and all the light, it was just suddenly brighter than anything that they've previously had. And this was discovered back in May, I believe.
Yeah, the article was from July, I think.
Yeah.
Interesting. Because at first I thought, man, a neutron star being devoured by a black hole, that's a bright body that might, cause something to light up. But then after a quick bit of research, I was like, well, these aren't related. I was like, because the neutron star one was just from like the other day. But yeah,
this one's from like a year ago.
Yeah.
Still...
Yeah, you don't necessarily think about black holes lighting up. Probably helps for photography, like for photography and getting images of them, or at least knowing, hey, there's a black hole there. I don't remember where. I feel like it might have been some sort of like short late night interview with Neil deGrasse Tyson, but he was talking about like scientists learn more from the absence of light in the universe than they do when they see stuff. It's more about not seeing and be like, well, wait a minute. We know how light works. Why is it not working the way that it works here? Like, why is it not doing what we think it's supposed to be doing in this area? And that usually leads to either unanswered questions or theories or actual answers. As more and more of these developments can happen. I can't remember the name of the satellite that was launched in the other article. There's a space telescope that was recently, and I say recently, within the last year, put into orbit, and it's one of the reasons why we get to see outer space. Oh no, sorry, there's another article I was reading. It was not the neutron star one. It was something completely different. The neutron star one, that's not telescope stuff. That's gravitational wave recording mechanisms on the planet that are doing that. Again, all science is way over my head, and things that I did not even know existed out in the middle of nowhere, but apparently they do. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode of the Citadel Cafe. You can find more info about the show and some of the links that Alastair and I talked about at thecitadelcafe.com. The music for the show was composed by Kevin MacLeod. You can email us at thecitadelcafe@gmail.com. Find us by name on Twitter and Facebook. And hey, you can also subscribe on iTunes, Android, Stitcher, and Spotify. But word of mouth is the best way to share the show. If you really want to bring more people into the Citadel Cafe fold, then just tell them about it. Say, hey, I like this podcast. You should listen to it. And I will thank you very much. There's a lot of podcasts out there, something like 700,000 podcasts. So to stand out and grow the listener base is challenging. So I need your help. Tell people. My name is Joel Duggan. You can find everything that I am doing online, including my illustration and design portfolio at joelduggan.com. You can also follow me over on the Spawn Chunks. That's at spawnchunks.com. It's my podcast all about Minecraft. And of course, I'm Joel Duggan on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, all the social media that matters. Alastair, where can people find you and the cool stuff that you're doing online?
So I'm on Twitter as @imcfly, and my website is ohmyzod.com, where I have all sorts of movie retrospectives, and I also have a list of films that are coming out that I'm pretty much interested in seeing. So if you're into sci-fi, superhero movies, and all that kind of stuff, it's a good list to go check out.
You've been listening to the Citadel Cafe, where we are fast, easy, and cheap, but you can only pick two. So you might be wondering why Alastair and I were sounding really confused about the black hole story at the end of the show, and it's because I had the wrong link in the show notes. I'll take the hit for that because I just was going off of Alastair's headline and was kind of surfing the article. I didn't even read the headline, and then when I saw that it was posted in July 27th, 2018, I was like, that's weird. Why is it from a year ago? The article that should have been there will be corrected and will be there. I might as well post the old one as well, but I'll make a special note to say that the article from August 13th, our galaxy's black hole suddenly lit up and nobody knows why, that article will be there. There's no wonder that you and I were confused about this and struggling to find like talking points. It's like I was scanning this article while you were talking. It's like none of this really sounds like a black hole lighting up. I don't really get it.
I was looking through going like, I know that it was saying how many times brighter it was, and I'm looking through going like, where is it in this article? And I'm trying to focus on the conversation, but I also can't find these numbers anywhere, which was really confusing me. And and it was just the copying the URL. There was a weird banner that had come from Vice, and I think that it was basically just linking to the wrong article. And when I dismissed that, then I got the right link. And so here's the article from August 13th, which I was pretty sure, like, this is a pretty recent article, but I'm looking at it and it's saying July 27th. So it's maybe just a month out. And then I noticed 2018. It's like, okay, hang on.
Yeah.
This is a lot older than I remember the story being.
Yeah. And in the article that I'm looking at now, it says on the night of May 13th, 2019, UCLA astronomer Tan Du and his colleagues were watching Sagittarius A, that's the name of the giant black hole, using the Keck telescope on the summit of Mauna Kea in Hawaii. And it goes on.
And it wasn't 17 times brighter. I knew there was a 7 there, but it was 75 times brighter.
Yeah. 75 times brighter in the near infrared band.
And they've ever seen it.
Very cool. Yeah, no, that's really cool. Well, I'll have all of them just because we sort of talked about the wrong one, but I'll have that in there.
I was still trying to talk about the right one, but I just wasn't getting any information for the.
I
was thrown off because I was like, why is the headline changed?
No, the closest supermassive black hole to Earth is a mere 26,000 light years away. That's me. I was reading the wrong article. I said that on the show proper. Anyway, so we'll have this correction in there. I'll tag this at the end of the show. And hopefully everyone will find the right black hole.